I decided to do another giant egg. I'm starting off with white gesso and giving a good, decent, thick coat all over the egg. Once I've done that, I'm going to grab the Crackle stamp. All of the items I will list below this video, so you will be able to get the codes. Everything is by Stamperia. And I am stamping into the wet gesso so that I create a texture. I let that dry naturally and then took the two dome shapes that I had left from my Christmas ornaments and traced around them so that I could use a scalpel blade and cut through the egg. The polystyrene is particularly thick, so I found myself a long blade cutter, and you always land up cutting at about a 45-degree angle, and that makes for rather a small window. So once I have cut the opening, I then excavate the excess so that I have a bigger opening. After that, I take sandpaper, any sandpaper will do, not too rough, and sandpaper the edges smooth and tidy up any bumps that I have. To clean up is really easy. Just spritz everything with water, it stops the static, and then cleaning up is as quick as that. Now you can see I am drawing around my airship with water on my paintbrush so that I can tear the edges. And I'm using mixed media glue to glue the rice paper onto the egg. And again, because it is polystyrene, I let that air dry. And while that's air drying, I am rolling out some of Stamperia's soft clay to make the porthole edges around my two holes that I have just cut. And I am using the texture impression sheet for this. I then glued it in place using extra forte glue and did the same for the second piece, the smaller piece. And with the bits that were left over, I sprayed and joined them all together, re-rolled them out, did the same thing but cut strips using the width of my ruler to be able to glue on the inside of my window. Again, using extra forte glue to hold it in place. The clay is really easy to use and is quite versatile. Now I'm just making sure that my windows still fit, having trimmed off the little hanging bit from the Christmas ornament, and using texture sand paste, I am using my finger to apply it to fill the gap around the porthole area where I have applied the clay. And again, while that is drying, I am starting to do the painting, and I'm using turquoise, orange and white to blend together to create the sea green color that is around the airship. And so the joy of this is you can mix and match the colors that came from the paper as you go. It really is quite a satisfying thing to do. I also add a little bit of water so that it is a bit thinner and it seeps into the texture that I created with the stamp. Once I had done the airship side, I put the two sides together so that the join would not be so obvious, and worked my way around the portholes with the colors so that everything was seamless. I wish I could work at this pace in real life. This video was shot over 4 hours of working, so I had 4 hours of footage. I have sped it up at 20 times my normal speed. So from 4 hours of footage, we have 12 minutes, 24. Okay, so now that I am happy with that, I'm going to use the leftovers and paint the inside of the egg. I want the inside of my egg to be like almost like a sky with a bit of land, so I have done blue at the top. Now I'm getting ready to create the internal things, and I just want the wings. So I have taken some of Stamperia's soft clay and I have filled the middle of the mold with the soft clay so that I only get the wings. And I very carefully squished the clay so that it was at about 45-degree angle, so that when I want to glue it onto the back of Lady Vagabond, I have the right angle, approximately. I needed to sandpaper it a little bit to make it work, but before I glue it onto her, and I had done already in my stash, so I'm sorry I'm not showing you how I painted her, but I will be doing a video on how to paint molds later. So I'm using the tarantica waxes in turquoise and gold for this. And then I needed an airship for the outside. And Stamperia has a wonderful soft resin that is very, very malleable is the word I'm looking for. I had to mix in 2 goes because the pots being black, I didn't realize how little was left in my one batch, so I had to make in 3 different batches, which, as you can see here, because it's quite slow setting, it wasn't a problem. And it takes quite a few minutes, I would say about 20 minutes to half an hour before you can take it out of the mold. And then once it's out of the mold, I suggest you lay it over the shaped object that you want. I put both gel medium and hot glue on, but I waited too long and the hot glue was set, so I had to do it again. But at this speed you hardly notice. Now I'm taking the excess gel medium out from underneath where it's oozed out, just to make sure that it all looks good. And even though my clay isn't 100% dry yet, I've decided that I want to leave it overnight, and so I am adding the leather Aquacolor to the window area so that everything will be hard enough for me to work on the next day, because I want to still add some waxes on top. And with the clay being quite soft, when I press too hard it is flattening at this stage. And while I've got the brown out, I'm also adding it to the texture sand paste that I had applied, making sure that I have no spaces. And this I am helping with a heat gun just for a little bit so that it doesn't run any further, and adding a little bit more shadow area. Finally, before I left everything to dry, I did the alcohol inks, and I worked with turquoise, blue and brown, and did a base layer of everything. I even did some shading on the wings on top of the blue with some brown, which you'll see just now. I like this process because it's a really quick way of painting without having to be terribly precise, because ultimately when you rub the tarantica wax over the top, it picks up all the details in the mold and you get the most amazing definition without having spent hours painting every window and wing, feather, etc. Using the tarantica, I'm now having a good go over everything. This is now the next day. Of course, in the video it just continues, so you wouldn't know that. But yes, I left it to dry overnight, and now I'm adding the tarantica everywhere and a little bit of the ombra, which is shadow in Italian. So the new packaging comes out saying shadow, the original packaging says ombra. And I like my shadows always to be on the left hand side of my object, so you'll notice I've got it on the left of my airship and on the left of my portholes. Now I'm adding the gold tarantica to the other side of the egg just to make sure everything matches up, and then using a little bit of the brown alcohol ink and a tiny bit of the green, I have aged the porthole windows a little bit. Then using the extra forte glue, I have glued them in place. The extra forte glue dries relatively quickly, and so while that is drying, I'm now continuing on the inside. This piece of brown texture impression sheet I found in my stash. I had made it previously with the crystal resin together with some of the colorants, And this is the porthole piece that was left from the middle, which I left to dry overnight, and I have used the Aquacolor in Aquamarine over it, together with some gold tarantica. I will show you how I made the light bulb, which you can see me testing here. That's the next part of the video that I'm going to show you once I've glued everything in place. And I want her like she's on the, I don't know, sort of flying in a sky above the city. I've got London in the backdrop. And this is how I made the light bulb. I had a single LED light, which I pressed into some clay in the light bulb section. I used my quick setting resin, my 2-minute resin, which is different in every country, so I can't tell you. I'm in Germany, so I use a quick setting resin that is local to Germany. And once that was set, I could then pull the clay out and carefully make sure that I had none left. And eventually I actually pulled the whole thing out because I was finding this very fiddly, to make sure that I had no clay left and to trim where I didn't want the resin. Cleaned it, popped it back in, and then measured out, I think it was 20 mils of crystal resin, and put that in my mold to set. And now I have the most gorgeous lump to put in my egg. Ta-da! Done. So here we can see the finished egg, the portholes, the airship. Oh, and I added brads and the what Stamperia calls bubbles for extra added interest. Now you can see the inside, and I'm done. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye for now.